6 days in the darkness. Colonel Nathan Price counted time by the rumbling of his stomach and the dying of his soldiers. They had lost 18 people since retreating into the mining tunnels. 7 from wounds, 4 from a tunnel collapse, 7 more in the fighting that never seemed to stop. The Vorathi had sent hunting parties into the mines on the second day. They expected to find scared prey hiding in holes. They found something else. Sergeant Lisa Brennan had organized the defense. She knew these tunnels. She had studied the mining maps on her first week at the outpost, because Lisa always studied the terrain, always planned for the worst. "They're coming again," whispered Danny Vaughn. The young private was crouched behind a mining cart, his rifle pointed at the dark corridor ahead. Lisa nodded. She could hear them too. The clicking of Vorathi claws on stone, the hiss of their breathing. They were not quiet creatures. They did not believe they needed to be. "Wait for my signal," she said. The first Vorathi appeared in the tunnel. Its yellow eyes glowed in the darkness. It held its weapon ready, scanning for targets. Behind it came 3 more, then 5 more, spreading out in standard hunting formation. Lisa held up 3 fingers. 2 fingers. 1. The ceiling exploded. Danny had spent the last day rigging mining explosives above the tunnel intersection. The blast brought down tons of rock on the lead Vorathi. The survivors stumbled back, confused and blinded by dust. Lisa's squad opened fire from 3 directions. It was over in seconds. Lisa's squad opened fire from 3 directions. It was over in 3 directions. It was over in seconds. 12 Vorathi dead. No human casualties. Move, Lisa ordered. They'll send more. We relocate to position 7. The survivors moved through the tunnels like ghosts. They knew every path, every hiding spot, every place where the rock was weak enough to collapse. The Vorathi knew nothing. They stumbled through the darkness, dying in 1s and 2s, never seeing the humans who killed them. Ambassador Claire Whitmore had never held a weapon before the attack. Now she carried a pistol at all times. She helped tend the wounded, rationed the supplies, and tried to keep the civilians calm. "How much longer?" asked a young mother holding her infant son. "When will help come?" Claire wanted to lie. She wanted to promise that rescue was coming any moment. But she was a diplomat. She knew the distances involved. She knew how long it took to assemble a fleet. "I don't know," she said honestly. "But we're going to survive until they get here. That's what humans do. We survive." The mother looked at her with desperate eyes. "My baby, he needs medicine. He's getting worse." Claire took her hand. "We'll find a way. We always find a way." In the Vorathi command center on the surface, Warlord Kethril was growing frustrated. He stood over a holographic map of the tunnel system, watching red dots disappear one by one. Each dot was a soldier. Each disappearance was another failure. "How many have we lost?" he demanded. His officer hesitated before answering. 147, my lord." "The prey? They're difficult to hunt." Kethril slammed his clawed hand against the display. "They are prey. Soft creatures with no natural weapons. How can they kill trained Vorathi warriors?" "They know the tunnels, my lord. They set traps. They strike from shadows and vanish before we can respond. Our soldiers report that fighting them is like fighting smoke." Another officer approached nervously. "There is something else, my lord. The humans, they are doing strange things with our dead." Kethril turned slowly. "Explain." "They leave the bodies arranged in patterns, posed in death. Some with their eyes removed, others with human symbols carved into their scales." The officer swallowed hard. "Our soldiers are becoming afraid to enter the tunnels. They say the humans fight like demons." Kethril stared at him for a long moment. Deep in his predator brain, something stirred. Something uncomfortable. Something that felt almost like doubt. He crushed it instantly. Increase the hunting parties. Send 100 soldiers at a time. Flood the tunnels with troops. I want those prey dead or captured by tomorrow. In the deepest part of the mines, Nathan Price addressed his survivors. They were dirty, tired, and running low on everything. But they were still alive. Still fighting. I'm not going to lie to you, he said. We're in bad shape. Ammunition is low. Medical supplies are almost gone. We've lost good people. He paused, looking at their faces in the dim light. Soldiers, civilians, children, all of them depending on him. But we've also killed over 100 of them. We've made them afraid to come into our tunnels. We've shown them that humans don't give up. He pointed upward, toward the surface. Right now, up there, a fleet is coming. I know it. Our people don't abandon each other. They're coming for us. Lisa stepped forward. Sir, what do we do until then? Nathan smiled grimly. We make the Varathi regret every step they take in our tunnels. We hit them hard, we disappear, and we hit them again. We don't need to win. We just need to make losing cost them so much that they wish they had never come here. Danny Vaughn raised his hand. The young private looked different now. The fear was still there, but it had transformed into something harder. Sir, I have an idea about the ventilation system. We could use it to spread sound through the tunnels. Confuse them. Make them think we're everywhere at once. Nathan nodded. What did you have in mind? 2 hours later, human music echoed through the Varathi tunnels. Old war songs. Marching drums. The sound of boots stomping in rhythm. It came from everywhere and nowhere, bouncing off walls, filling every passage. The Varathi soldiers froze. Their hunting formation broke as they tried to locate the source of the sound. Then the lights went out. When the emergency power came back on, 12 more Varathi were dead. And somewhere in the darkness, human voices were singing. On the surface, Kethro listened to reports with growing unease. His soldiers were refusing to enter certain tunnel sections. Morale was dropping. The easy victory he had promised was becoming a nightmare. They are prey, he muttered to himself. Just prey. But deep down, in a place he would never admit existed. Doubt was growing and far above the moon, at the edge of the solar system. 40 human warships dropped out of hyperspace. The fleet had arrived. The war room of the captured Varathi command vessel smelled like smoke and blood. Admiral Patricia Cole stood at the center, surrounded by human soldiers with weapons drawn. Before her, kneeling in chains, was Warlord Kethro. His scales were dull now. His yellow eyes had lost their arrogant glow. He looked at the human admiral with something he had never felt before in his long life of conquest. He looked at her with fear. How? He asked. His voice was quiet, broken. You're kind. You have no claws, no armor. Your bodies are soft. Your lives are short. Everything in your biology screams prey. How did you defeat us? Patricia looked at him for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was calm. You made a mistake that many have made before you. You studied our bodies and saw weakness. You should have studied our history. She pressed a button on her datapad. Images appeared on the screens around them. Images of human history. Ancient warriors fighting with swords and shields. Medieval battles with thousands of soldiers clashing on bloody fields. Modern wars with weapons that could level cities. We have been killing each other since we first learned to pick up stones, Patricia said. Every generation of humans has fought. Every generation has learned new ways to destroy. We wage war against ourselves, against nature, against everything that tries to stop us. It is what we are. More images. Soldiers in trenches during world wars. Marines storming beaches. Paratroopers dropping behind enemy lines. Astronauts fighting in the vacuum of space. You'd call this prey because we have no natural weapons. You were wrong. We have the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy. She tapped her head. We adapt. We learn. We never stop finding new ways to win. When we face an enemy we cannot defeat, we change ourselves until we can. Kethral stared at the images. He saw humans suffering terrible losses and coming back stronger. He saw them losing battles and winning wars. He saw an endless cycle of violence that had shaped their species for thousands of years. You are monsters, he whispered. Patricia shrugged. Maybe, but we're monsters who protect our own. And you threatened our children. 2 days later, the news reached the Varathi Dominion homeworld. The fleet sent to conquer Vara 7 had been destroyed. Warlord Kethral was captured. The prey species had proven to be anything but prey. The Dominion Council assembled an emergency session. Intelligence officers presented their new findings about humanity with shaking hands. The humans originate from a world they call Earth, reported the chief intelligence officer. It is a death world by our classification standards. High gravity, extreme temperature variations, dangerous predators on every continent. Their own environment has been trying to kill them since they evolved. The council members shifted uncomfortably. Furthermore, humans do not live in peace with each other. They have fought constant wars throughout their history. Their military traditions go back thousands of cycles. Every generation produces soldiers who train from childhood in the art of killing. One council member raised his hand. Are you saying they are more warlike than us? The intelligence officer paused. I am saying that war is not something humans do. It is something humans are. They have perfected violence in ways we never imagined possible. And when threatened, they put aside all internal conflicts and unite against the common enemy. The council chamber fell silent. What do you recommend? Asked the council leader. The intelligence officer took a deep breath. Immediate reclassification of humans from prey species to apex predator. Full diplomatic contact. Non-aggression treaties. And under no circumstances should we provoke them further. On Vara 7, the survivors were being evacuated to hospital ships. Danny Vaughn walked through the temporary medical camp, still processing everything that had happened. 6 days ago, he had been a scared private on his first deployment. Now, he was a combat veteran who had survived impossible odds. He found Sergeant Lisa Brennan sitting alone, staring at a list of names on her datapad. The names of everyone they had lost. Sergeant? He said quietly. Lisa looked up. Her eyes were red, but her face was calm. Lon, you did good down there. Real good. Danny sat down next to her. I was terrified the whole time. Everyone was terrified. Bravery isn't about not being scared. It's about being scared and doing the job anyway. She looked back at the list. 18 names. 18 people who won't go home. But everyone else did. Because of what we did. Lisa nodded slowly. Yeah, that's what we hold on to. Across the camp, Master Sergeant Victor Dunn stood at a temporary memorial. Photos and personal items had been placed there for the fallen. One photo showed a young soldier who had died in the first hours of the attack. The face reminded Victor of his son. I didn't save him, Victor said quietly. I couldn't save my boy. But maybe I saved someone else's son today. A hand touched his shoulder. Colonel Nathan Price stood beside him. You did, Sergeant. You saved a lot of people. We all did. Victor wiped his eyes. Think this will stop them? The Varathi? Think they learned their lesson? Nathan looked up at the stars. Human ships were patrolling the space around the moon. Rescue vessels were coming and going. The Varathi fleet was nothing but debris. I don't know if they learned, Nathan said, but I know word will spread. Other species will hear what happened here. They'll hear that when you attack humanity, we don't surrender. We don't negotiate. We send every soldier we have, from the youngest recruit to the oldest veteran. And we take back what's ours. That's a scary message. It's meant to be. Ambassador Claire Whitmore recorded the official diplomatic message that would be broadcast to the galactic community. She had written a dozen drafts, trying to find the right words. In the end, she chose simplicity. To all spacefaring civilizations, she began. Humanity has been called many things by those who do not know us. We have been called primitive. We have been called weak. We have been called prey. She paused, looking directly at the camera. We are none of those things. We are a species born on a harsh world, shaped by endless struggle, forged by fire and blood. We have been fighting since before we had words. War is in our bones. It is in our history. It is in our hearts. But we do not seek conflict. We do not wish to conquer or destroy. We want only to live in peace, to explore, to grow. Those who offer friendship will find friends. Those who offer trade will find partners. Her eyes hardened. But those who threaten our worlds, our people, our children, they will find an enemy unlike any they have faced. They will learn what happens when every soldier who ever lifted a weapon answers the call. They will learn the price of underestimating humanity. Consider this your only warning. The message ended. It was broadcast across every known frequency, reaching hundreds of species throughout the galaxy. In intelligence centers on 1,000 worlds, analysts updated their files on the species called humans. The old classification, emerging civilization, minimal threat, was deleted. The new classification was simple, do not provoke. And somewhere in deep space, a young Varathi officer who had barely survived the Battle of Vera 7 told his children a story. A story about soft creatures with no claws and no armor who had fought like demons, who had turned prey into predator. Never attack the humans, he told them, no matter how weak they look. Never attack the humans. It was a lesson the galaxy would not forget. The journey to the front lines took 12 days. In that time, Vethrin learned more about humans than he had in 3 cycles of distant observation. He learned that they slept for 8 hours every day, lying unconscious and vulnerable in a state that would terrify most species. He learned that they consumed the flesh of other creatures from their world, cooking it over fire and eating it with obvious pleasure. He learned that they gathered together each evening to share meals, telling stories and laughing at jokes that made no sense to him. But most of all, he learned about their history. Dr. Lauren Beck was the ship's xenobiologist, assigned to help Vethrin understand human culture. She was a kind woman with warm brown eyes and a patient way of explaining things. She spent hours answering his questions, showing him records and images from Earth's past. What he saw disturbed him deeply. Humans had been killing each other since before they had language to describe it. They had fought with rocks and sticks, with swords and arrows, with explosives and radiation and weapons that could destroy entire cities in a single flash of light. They had killed millions of their own kind in conflicts that lasted years. They had committed horrors that made the devourers look almost merciful. How are you still alive? Vethrin asked one evening. How did you not destroy yourselves? Dr. Beck thought about this for a moment. Because we're also capable of great kindness, she said. The same species that built weapons to kill millions also built hospitals to save millions. We're complicated that way. But why do you fight so much? Because we care too much, she said. We fight for our families, our friends, our beliefs. We fight for people we've never met, just because we think they deserve to be protected. It's our greatest weakness, and maybe our greatest strength. Vethrin did not understand, but he kept watching, kept learning. He observed the soldiers training in the ship's combat base. They were not elegant like the Draxan warriors, who moved like dancers. They were not efficient like the Skarathi drones, who acted as one. Humans fought ugly. They fought dirty. They used tricks and traps and tactics that no honorable species would consider, but they were terrifying in their determination. Sergeant Nathan Park was a small man with scars on his hands and a quiet voice. He had been a soldier for 20 years. One afternoon, he let Vethrin watch his unit practice close combat. "Why do you keep getting up?" Vethrin asked. After watching a young soldier get knocked down for the 5th time, Park looked at him with something like amusement. "Because the fight isn't over until you stop getting up," he said. "Any soldier can fight when they're winning. The real test is what you do when you're losing. And what do humans do when they're losing?" Park smiled. It was not a kind smile. "We get angry." On the 8th day, Vethrin witnessed something that confused him even more than the violence. He was walking through the crew quarters when he heard music. Following the sound, he found a group of humans gathered in a small room. They were singing together, their voices rising and falling in harmony. Some had tears on their faces. Commander Hayes was among them. When the song ended, he noticed Vethrin standing in the doorway. "Come in," Hayes said. "You should see this." The room was decorated with images. Photographs, Vethrin realized. Pictures of faces, of families, of places on Earth. Each crew member had brought something from home to hang on the walls. "We're going into battle tomorrow," Hayes explained. "This is how we prepare. We remember what we're fighting for. You think about your families before combat?" Vethrin asked. "Does that not make you afraid?" "It makes us stronger," Hayes said. "Fear is just love with nowhere to go. When I think about my wife, my children, I don't feel weak. I feel like I could tear apart anyone who threatens them with my bare hands." Vethrin thought about this. In his experience, soldiers perform better when they suppress their emotions. The Draxan trained their warriors to feel nothing. The Skarathi had no individual emotions at all, but humans went into battle with their hearts full of love. It seemed like madness. The next morning, the Devourer scouts found them. There were 6 enemy ships against the Endurance and its 3 escort vessels. The Devourers had better weapons, thicker armor, more experience. By any logical calculation, the humans should have retreated. They did not retreat. Lieutenant Megan Torres commanded the tactical station. She was young, barely 30 cycles old by human counting, but her voice was steady as she called out targeting solutions. She found weaknesses in the enemy formation that Vethrin never would have noticed. She anticipated their movements before they made them. "How are you doing this?" Vethrin asked, watching in amazement as the human ships danced through enemy fire. Torres smiled, not looking up from her screens. "Humans have been playing war games since we were children. We've been thinking about this our whole lives." The battle lasted 3 hours. When it was over, 4 Devourer ships were destroyed. 2 had fled. The Endurance had taken damage, but she was still flying. Vethrin stood on the observation deck, watching the wreckage drift through space. He had seen many battles in his life. He had studied hundreds more, but he had never seen anything like this. Humans did not fight like other species. They did not follow predictable patterns. They took risks that seemed insane. They made decisions in seconds that other commanders would spend hours debating. And somehow, impossibly, it worked. Commander Hayes found him there an hour later. "You seem troubled," Hayes said. "I am trying to understand," Vethrin admitted. "You should not have won that battle. The odds were against you." "Odds are just numbers," Hayes said. "They tell you what will probably happen. They don't tell you what will happen when someone refuses to accept them." He put a hand on Vethrin's shoulder. It was a strange gesture, warm and heavy. "We're not special," Hayes said. "We're not stronger or smarter than anyone else. But we have something that most species lose somewhere along the way. We still believe that we can change things. We still believe that fighting matters, even when we're losing. Veteran looked at this human, this soft creature from an unremarkable world. What happens when you reach the real battle? He asked. When you face the full Devourer fleet? Hayes smiled. Then, we show them what humans are really made of. For the first time since boarding the Endurance, Veteran felt something he did not expect. He felt hope. The narrow passage was the gateway to the heart of Coalition space. Beyond it lay 100 populated worlds, including the homeworlds of a dozen species. If the Devourers broke through, nothing would stop them from consuming everything. The Coalition had gathered every ship they could find. 200 vessels from across the galaxy, representing species that had been enemies for thousands of years. They put aside their differences because they had no choice. The Devourers were coming for all of them, but when the enemy fleet appeared on the sensors, even that great armada seemed small. 500 Devourer warships, the largest force they had ever assembled. Their formation stretched across the void like a wall of death, blocking out the stars themselves. Veteran stood on the observation deck of the Endurance and felt something he had not felt since he was a child. True terror. The Coalition commanders gathered one last time. The meeting was short. There was nothing to discuss. The math was simple. They were outnumbered more than 2 to 1. Many of their ships were damaged from previous battles. Their crews were exhausted, demoralized, afraid. We should negotiate, the Crystal Ambassador said. His voice was shaking. Perhaps they will accept tribute. Perhaps we can. Devourers do not negotiate, Admiral Dexon said quietly. You know this. We all know this. Then what do we do? The room fell silent. Veteran looked at the faces of the commanders, the admirals, the leaders of worlds. He saw defeat in their eyes. They had already given up thought. Then Commander Hayes stood. We fight, he said. The Crystal Ambassador laughed, but there was no humor in it. Fight? Look at the numbers, human. We cannot win this battle. Maybe not, Hayes said, but we can make them pay for every inch. We can hurt them so badly that they'll think twice before coming back. We can show them that the galaxy isn't going to roll over and die. You're talking about suicide. I'm talking about defiance. Hayes looked around the room. 3 weeks ago, most of you were ready to surrender. You thought the war was already lost. But we're still here. We've won battles we shouldn't have won. We've saved people who should have died. And we've made the Devourers bleed for the first time in 10,000 years. He paused, letting his words sink in. I'm not asking anyone to die for nothing. I'm asking you to stand with us, to fight with everything you have. Not because we're going to win, but because some things are worth fighting for even when you can't win. The room was silent. Veteran watched the alien commanders, saw them looking at each other, saw them wrestling with fear and duty and something else. Pride, maybe. Or shame. Admiral Nexon was the first to speak. The old Volanthi warrior straightened his back and lifted his head. I have served the Coalition for 60 years, he said. I have won many battles and lost some, but I have never run from a fight. He looked at Hayes with something like respect. If the humans are willing to stand, then so am I. One by one, the other commanders added their voices. Some spoke of honor. Some spoke of duty. Some simply nodded. Too emotional to find words. When the meeting ended, the Coalition fleet turned to face the enemy. The battle began with a storm of fire. Veteran had never seen anything like it. The void lit up with weapons discharge, thousands of beams and missiles and projectiles crossing the darkness between the fleets. Ships exploded like stars going nova. The screams of dying crews filled the communication channels, but the Coalition held. The humans led the charge. They flew their damaged ships into the heart of the Devour formation, drawing fire away from their allies. They used tactics no one had ever seen before, improvising and adapting with every passing minute. Lieutenant Torres worked miracles at her station, coordinating attacks across the entire fleet. She found patterns in the Devour movements, predicted their strategies, turned their own formations against them. And Commander Hayes broadcast a message to the enemy fleet. His voice was calm, steady, absolutely certain. It carried across every frequency, reaching every Devour ship. "This is Commander Daniel Hayes of the United Earth Government," he said. "You came to our galaxy expecting easy prey. You expected us to run, to hide, to beg for mercy. You were wrong." On the tactical display, Veteran watched a wave of human ships crash into the Devour line. They hit with such force that the enemy formation actually buckled. "We are not afraid of you," Hayes continued. "We have been fighting since we crawled out of the mud on our little planet. We have survived ice ages, plagues, and wars that killed millions. We've stared into the darkness and refused to blink." Another wave. More Devour ships falling. The impossible was happening. The enemy was being pushed back. "If you defeat us today, we will come back. If you destroy our fleet, we will build another. If you burn our worlds, we will rise from the ashes. We will hunt you across every star, every planet, every corner of this galaxy. We will never stop. We will never surrender. We will never forget." Hayes' voice dropped to something cold and terrible. "So ask yourselves, is this really a war you want to fight? Because we are just getting started." The Devour fleet wavered. For 10,000 years, they had never faced true resistance. They had conquered through fear, through overwhelming force, through the certain knowledge that no one could stand against them. But now, for the first time, they were afraid. The human ships pressed forward. The coalition followed, inspired by a courage they had forgotten they possessed. The battle raged for hours, brutal and bloody, with no quarter asked and none given. And then, impossibly, the Devourers began to retreat. Not all of them. Not easily. They fought every step of the way, and they took many ships with them. But they fell back. They gave ground. They broke. When it was over, the coalition had lost nearly half its fleet. Thousands were dead. The victory had cost everything they had. But they had won. Veteran stood on the observation deck, watching the Devourer fleet flee into the darkness between stars. He was crying, though he did not know when he had started. Commander Hayes found him there. "You did it," Veteran said. "You actually did it." Hayes shook his head. "We did it. All of us, together." He looked out at the stars, at the wreckage drifting through space, at the distant lights of the fleeing enemy. "That's how you beat the darkness," he said quietly. "Not alone. Never alone." The war ended 3 months later. Without their main fleet, the Devourers could not sustain their advance. Coalition forces pushed them back system by system, world by world. For the first time in 10,000 years, the great hunters became the hunted. They sent envoys to negotiate. They offered tribute, territory, anything to stop the fighting. But the coalition had learned something from the humans. They had learned that some enemies could not be bargained with, only defeated. When the last Devourer ships fled beyond the edge of known space, the galaxy celebrated. There were parades on 1,000 worlds. Statues were built. Songs were sung. The names of fallen heroes were carved into monuments that would stand for generations. But Veteran did not celebrate. He attended the human memorial service instead. It was held on Earth, in a city called Washington. Veteran had never visited the human homeworld before. He was surprised by how beautiful it was. Green trees, blue skies, water that sparkled in the sunlight. It did not look like the world that had produced such terrible warriors. The ceremony took place in a great open field, surrounded by white stone buildings. Thousands of humans had gathered there, dressed in dark colors. Many were crying. Others stood in silence, their faces like masks. Veteran found a place near the back and watched. Commander Hayes spoke first. He stood at a podium before a wall covered in names. Thousands of names. Every human who had died in the war. "We are here to remember," Hayes said. His voice was steady, but Veteran could see the grief in his eyes. Not to celebrate victory, not to honor glory, but to remember the people who paid the price for our survival. He paused, looking out at the crowd. They were not special. They were not born heroes. They were teachers and farmers, engineers and artists. They were mothers and fathers, sons and daughters. They were ordinary people who did extraordinary things because someone had to do them. He turned to face the wall of names. They did not die for medals or monuments. They died for the person standing next to them. They died for families they would never see again. They died so that strangers on worlds they would never visit could live. His voice broke slightly. He took a breath and continued. That is what it means to be human. That is what it has always meant. We are small and fragile, and our lives are short. But we love so fiercely that we will burn ourselves out rather than let that love be destroyed. The crowd was silent. Somewhere, a child was crying. So we remember them, Hayes said. Not as heroes, not as legends, but as people. People who chose to stand between the darkness and everything they loved. People who gave everything so that we could give something to someone else. He stepped back from the podium. A moment later, music began to play. It was a simple melody, sad and beautiful, played by a single instrument Veteran did not recognize. One by one, humans walked forward to place flowers at the base of the wall. Some touched the names carved there, tracing the letters with their fingers. Some whispered words that Veteran could not hear. He watched them for a long time. Afterward, High Counselor Zeth Era found him standing alone near the wall of names. I have read your preliminary reports, she said, but I would like to hear your conclusions in person. What did you learn about humanity? Veteran thought about everything he had witnessed. The battles and the quiet moments. The violence and the tenderness. The soldiers singing before combat. Captain Cole dying to save strangers. Commander Hayes weeping for his fallen crew. I learned that we were wrong about them, he said slowly. All of us. We thought they were weak because they showed emotion. We thought they were primitive because they fought among themselves. We thought they did not matter because they were small. He turned to face the High Counselor. But those things that we saw as weaknesses are actually their greatest strengths. They feel deeply, so they fight harder than anyone else. They have always been at war, so they understand it better than we ever could. They are small, so they know they cannot afford to give up. Zethara nodded slowly. And the question everyone has been asking, should we fear them? Veteran looked back at the wall of names, at the thousands of humans who had died so that others could live. Yes, he said, but not for the reasons everyone thinks. Explain. The Devourers were powerful. They had better ships, better weapons, more experience. By every measure, they should have won. But they lost because they did not understand what they were fighting. He paused, searching for the right words. Humans do not fight to win. They fight because they cannot accept not fighting. They fight for love, for family, for strangers they will never meet. They will throw themselves into impossible battles, accept certain death, sacrifice everything, because something inside them refuses to let the darkness win. Zethara was silent for a moment. That sounds like madness. It is madness, Veteran agreed. Beautiful, terrible madness. And it is the reason the Devourers ran. Because they finally understood that humans would never stop coming. No matter how many died, more would rise to take their place. The war would never end until one side was completely destroyed. He looked up at the sky, at the stars that were just becoming visible in the fading light. The stars tremble when humanity marched to war because humans make the universe care. They are small and mortal, and their lives are brief. But they have something the devourers never had. They have something worth dying for. And what is that? Vethrin smiled sadly. Each other. He submitted his final report that night. It was classified at the highest level, restricted to only the most senior members of the Galactic Assembly. In it, he wrote a warning that would guide coalition policy for generations to come. Never give humanity a reason to fight. Never threaten what they love. Never make them choose between surrender and war, because they will always choose war. And when humanity marched to battle, when they set aside their differences and turn their fury outward, when they fight with all the love and rage and stubborn hope that burns in their fragile hearts, nothing in the universe can stand against them. That is why the stars tremble. Not because humans are the strongest, but because they are the most willing to sacrifice everything for what they believe. And that makes them the most dangerous species the galaxy has ever known.